So before I tear this patch down, I want to put together a video about this drum kit and what I have wired up. So I'll walk through each of the drums and talk about how I've interfaced it to the modular synthesizer, some of this hardware gear, and how it feeds into the computer for recording. So this is a completely hardware-based electronic drum set, with the exception of MidiPipe, which I have running on an old Mac to connect the Synapse, which handles a bunch of the foot pedals and foot controllers. That needs to get run into the computer to be divvied up via MIDI in the Factotum, the Expert Sleepers FH2. But aside from that, everything else that's happening is happening via hardware direct. And that includes all of the pads on this side of the kit, except for this one right here. And the two foot pedals that I have down here. Shown here, you can see the modular synthesizer that's running this patch. And down here, a bunch of the hardware. So I'm recording through a Quantum 2626 with an ultra gain for the additional 8 channels. You see the Roland XV5050, a couple of effects units, a Roland SDE 1000 digital delay, and a Alesis MidiVerb 2 for reverb. Down here you see the circuit bent DDR-30 and an eMagic AMT8, which is just a big MIDI merge, which I'm using for a bunch of that control. Up here is the Blasset frac rack, the DTX brains over there, as well as an Alesis brain, which I use to run the 2 3-pad clusters. So I'll walk around each of the drums, talk about what's happening on the drum, where the control's going, and and kind of walk through it. So we'll start right here in the center on the snare. The snare is hooked up to a Blasset Darkstar Chaos noise module, which I've had since the late 90s. And what I've done is I've run the raw noise source into the Make Noise Optimix with a maths controlling the gate. And so the maths enables me to take advantage of the hold functionality on these drums. On the Mandala drums don't have a MIDI off message, and so when I press down on the center, it holds the note. And so that's one of the things I've really wanted to explore with this drum set, is what does it mean to have the ability to hold a note on a drum set. Additionally, these drums have position sensitivity going from the center of the head to the edge. And so what I've done is I've changed the voice as I go from the center to the edge. And so with that, I'm using this control change signal, which is in MIDI, converting it to control voltage with the Expert Sleepers FH2, and then as it moves from the center to the edge, adjusting a variety of the parameters. And so I'm tweaking the noise filter and the VCO pitch as part of that. And so that creates this kind of interesting snare-ish sound. Up here on the right, I have a single voice triggered off of the quad morphing VCO, and I've done something interesting here. Between these two drums, I have a cross modulation setup. So on this drum, you can hear the voice gets more cloudy and detuned as I move from the center to the edge. But what I've done is, on this drum here, as I move inwards from the edge to the center, I can change the wavetable of the synth sound that's being triggered here. So this is just a very simple wavetable oscillator going into VCA. And here, if I change the position, you'll see I'll pick up a different waveform. And so by playing these two together, I can start to change the sound of the drum here. Is something which I do in this track. On the left side here, I have a combination of a noise engineering BIA and a WMD. This one I think is the Chimera. And so originally I just had the Chimera, but I wanted something with a little bit of a sharper attack, and so I put in the BIA. And again, on both these things, you have morphing parameters as I play the drum. And so on the the Chimera, I'm adjusting the FX amount, decay, and just those two parameters there. On the BIA, I'm adjusting the morph, the fold, the harmonics, and that's it. And so you get the same sort of effect as I move across the drum. And the general sound changes. And so the other piece of cross modulation I have here, start on the edge here, is I'm running the combination of those two modules through a Klangwork, which is another Blasset module from back in the day. And so if I have it in the center here, you'll hear one sound, and on the edge, a much cleaner sound. So in combination, as I play the more distorted, cloudy waveform, I get a more distorted sound here. As I play the cleaner waveform, I get a cleaner sound over here. And so that's another thing that I kind of wanted to explore with this, is how do you explore multi-dimensional space with these two control signals? So really, at this stage, we have a plane, 2 dimensions of control, where increasing this halfway and this halfway puts you right in the center of that modulation plane. And so as I get deeper into this, I want to start adding additional cross modulation to go to 3, 4, 5 dimensional modulation space and see what kind of interesting stuff happens there. So those are the first 3 drums. Over here on the right, I have a sub-hit, which comes from the Make Noise Misteron. And on this one, I'm not doing a whole lot of modification of it. What's really changing the sound is the filter. So I have this running through an MOTM 1485 GX VCF in frac format. And as I adjust the velocity of the hit, the filter changes. So a soft hit's going to be very closed on the filter. A hard hit is going to be very open on the filter. Now the other thing that's going on here is as I move from the center to the edge, I'm changing the rate of a VCO, which is sweeping a sequential switch matrix. And so in the center, it's very, very slow. And on the edge, it's very, very fast, almost audio rate. And so between these two, I'm getting different levels of switching within the sequential switch matrix. Now, why that's interesting is I fed 4 audio feeds from other drums into the inputs for the sequential switch matrix, and the outputs are going to the Mutable Instruments clouds and applying the sort of granular processing. And so you hear that kind of sweeping thing every now and then. Play with this a second, see if I get it to go. But occasionally you'll get a freeze, and it'll kind of give you a sweeping texture in the background. So again, on these three, or excuse me, on these four, we have a variety of synth voices that are affected by the velocity or position of the hit, and are sort of doing cross modulation within the modular synthesizer. On the left here, the last one I have is a WMD Kraken, so kind of a standard snare sound. And again, we go from the edge to the rim. We have a modulation of the decay, the shell, and the velocities being modified as well. So I can get louder, I can change kind of an interesting change from a high-pitched snare at the edge. Oop, and there's the clouds doing its thing. And then from the center, I have a very fat kind of snare sound. Yeah, you hear the clouds kind of doing that sputtering thing in the background. And that's kind of pseudo-random, but it adds a nice texture in the back there. So now on to some of the other drums. So up here on these pads, we have a Roland DDR-30, which is a drum set from the 80s that I've gone and I've circuit bent. So you're hearing these very distorted kind of electronic drum sounds. And those are just run on these 6 pads. There's a little bit of velocity action up. On these pads, I'm triggering chords off the Yamaha DTX. And so those chords are originally piped through a Roland XV5050 on like a struck metallic sound called hammer bell. And so those form the sort of like hit sounds within the song. And at the same time I'm triggering those, I'm using the same trigger output to hit the Crucible by WMD. No real change on the modification. There's a little bit of change on the pitch as I move from drum to drum. But that just gives kind of a combination of chordal hit and cymbal hit. And so that's it's a way I get a little accent on the hits there. Up here, I have the Yamaha DTX in sort of the alternate step mode, I think is what it's called, and it's triggering a melodic motif and a single note on the rim, and so those are each doing a different small sequence. And so I could use that to kind of add little melodic flourishes in there, in addition to just that sort of 2-note melody that I throw in occasionally. Down here, I have just a floor tom, but just kind of wanted another little tom hit to use for that end section. On the feet, I have a hi-hat, which I don't really use in this track. I have a standard kick, which is, again, coming out of the Yamaha DTX. Those are hooked direct to the Yamaha DTX. On the right here, though, I have the Crater. And that's a more electronic, distorted kick drum. No real modification to the sound as I hit it harder or softer. But I wanted two distinct kicks because of this other pedal, which I have hooked up to a global filter sweep. But as I adjust this, it changes the depth of a filter, which enables me to filter the entire kit. And so during the breakdown section, I can use this pedal to just filter out a selection of the sounds that's up here. And so yeah, so that's a global kit control that can affect the sound of the entire thing. And yeah, so that's about it. You have this interesting cross modulation up here between the Klangwork and the BIA and Chimera. Here you have the quad morphing VCO from Synesthesia Technology, and how we have a cloudier hit and changing the wavetable as we move from the center to the edge. And then a variety of melodic, both chordal and non-chordal options to draw from. And I think that's about it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough, and I will probably do another video about just the kit in general, where I'm coming from on some of the concepts here.